Do you love stamping? I certainly do. Let's review the basics. So, metal stamping is one of those beginner techniques that I think some people take for granted and maybe even forget about as they move on to more advanced techniques. But it can really be an excellent asset in the development of the aesthetics of your work. And also, it's just an essential skill if you need to sign or mark your work and things like that. So we're just going to go over some of the basics for today. When I'm teaching it, let's say a real quick workshop to people that haven't done it before, I do introduce them to a shorter handled hammer that for people that aren't used to hammers, it gives them a little bit more control, not as much strength and power when hitting the stamp, but it's better to have that kind of fine control. If I'm teaching, let's say an undergraduate student that's had a lot more experience with hammers and metalworking in general, I really recommend this 2-pound brass hammer. It has a great weight at the end, really helps with strong impressions of the stamps, just gives you that little bit of extra weight at the end there that really improves the stamping quality overall. I'm not sponsored in any way by Impress Art, but they do have a really amazing range of different kinds of stamps, from letters to numbers, punctuation, cute little symbols, and things like that. So they really do cater to the kind of the stamping enthusiast. And this is just a small little portable bench block that they sell. You really do need a steel surface to be stamping against, whether it's a small bench block, a larger bench block, or an anvil, just to support your piece. If you don't, and that's one of the kind of beginner mistakes, is stamping against a piece of wood or something like that, your metal is actually going to be pushed out the back a bit more rather than just being supported by the steel surface. Another thing that's really important is for your metal that you're stamping to be annealed. So this is 20 gauge aluminum that I've annealed and pickled to clean it so that we're ready for stamping. And so you want to make sure that it's softened before you start hammering into it. So to set up with a stamp, you want to make sure, this is a nice little anvil stamp from Impress Art that's fun. So you want to make sure that you have the proper orientation and direction. You're lining it up. You can mark it where you want on your piece. And you want to make sure that it is, you kind of feel the end of the stamp seat solidly against the surface of the metal, and that you're holding it perpendicular in all dimensions to the surface of the metal. So again, you could be looking at it one way and it might be tilted a little bit. So you do want to kind of check it from a couple different views to make sure that it's perpendicular. If you're not holding the stamp well or it's not perpendicular, it can shoot out and really be a hazard in the studio. So you do want to make sure that you have eye protection and you have your hammer that you're going to stamp with. You line it up, and you don't want to just kind of tippy tap. You want to really have one solid strike and make sure that it's a nice solid impression into the piece. Now, if you're really fussy about it, and you can see maybe in the video that the impression is just slightly lighter on the horn of the anvil there, with some stamps you can sort of work them back into the impression, angle it just so slightly, and kind of fix your impression. And again, you can see that it's darkened it up and it's a nice solid impression all the way around. I wouldn't try that without a little bit of experience there. And a common mistake that happens is to have skips or multiple kind of impressions from a stamp. Now, rather than just using stamps as a single visual impression or spelling things out with letter stamps or something, you can certainly use them for texture. So one that I really like using is just like a basic X, and you can sort of use it incorrectly on purpose. And just like I was saying, kind of move it around and skip, not hitting it as solidly, and just sort of moving it over the surface, and start developing like a nice kind of visual texture that can happen from the use of that stamp. And different stamps will give you different visual textures. So if we go with something that's a little bit more organic, like an O, same kind of thing. Rather than just one hard impression, kind of lightly tapping it, moving it around, maybe angling the stamp just slightly. And so you can see, start developing a little bit of a different kind of texture on your metal there. So that's another way of using those stamps. And a couple other stamps that we should sort of address. One is, that's a tradition for metalsmiths and jewelers, is to have a custom stamp made, and there's a variety of different companies online that can do that. And for this is a form of signing your work. And so I always mark up to make sure I don't sign upside down. This is a narrow text for Thurman, so I want to make sure that it's seated well, exactly where I want it. Sometimes I'll even scribe a line to make sure it's exactly where I want. Eye protection, lining it up, one solid impression. Nice, deep, clear stamp. And another stamp that you might come across are inside ring stamps. So you'll see this bent shank of the stamp, and that's to get inside of rings. So if you're either going to have a name stamp or you're stamping a particular, like 925 for sterling silver on a ring or something like that, this will go. This is a little bit trickier, and if you do a lot of these, they have grooved bench blocks to hold ring bands a little bit better. You want to place that in the center of the band. Again, holding it perpendicular from the surface of the metal, straight up and down. One solid impression. Now you may not be able to see this on the video since it's a really small stamp, but then that marks the particular kind of material that ring would be made out of. So if you see those kind of bent shank stamps, that's what those are used for as well. So just a real quick brief introduction to the variety of different ways that you can use stamps. And if you're a beginner out there, hope this refreshes you on just those basics. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to hit that subscribe button so that you can hear from me when I post future videos. Thanks for stopping by.